In the last video, you learned how to lay out and size child components using absolute X and Y positions, as well as relative percentage settings on both the parent and child components. In this video, you will learn how to implement constraint-based layouts, where child components lay themselves out relative to pixel values set on the anchor positions in the parent container. To position and size components using constraint-based layout, you must place the components inside of a Spark container with the layout property set to an instance of the basic layout class. You can also use constraint-based layout inside of MX containers, but since the equivalent containers exist in Spark, you should use the Spark containers whenever possible. Previously, with the basic layout class, you have specified X and Y properties for components in order to position them absolutely in the display. For a constraint-based layout, you do not use X and Y properties. Instead, you use baseline, top, bottom, left, right, horizontal center, and vertical center. Each property takes a pixel value which determines the distance that the component will be positioned relative to the specified constraint for the parent container. Before I get back to the employee portal example that I was working with in the last video, let me illustrate the implementation of constraint-based layouts using design mode. Here is an MXML application without any visual controls. Note, however, that it does have a layout property set to basic layout. I am removing the min width and min height properties from the application container and then switching to design mode and dragging a panel container into the design area. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that the panel container looks the same as it did in design mode. Back in design mode, I am scrolling down in the properties view to the size and position section. These checkboxes represent the constraint properties that I outlined earlier. I'm clicking on the left constraint and setting a value of 50 pixels. I'm doing the same to the right constraint and the top and bottom constraint. When I save the file now and run the application, you can see that the panel is initially huge, and as I resize the browser, the panel always stays 50 pixels from each of the 4 edges. Back in Flash Builder, I'm switching to source mode to show you the left, right, top, and bottom constraints set to 50 pixels, and replacing them with horizontal center set to 0, and vertical center set to 0. When I save the file and run the application, the panel returns to its default size, but it is positioned exactly 0 pixels from the horizontal and vertical center of the application. This is the employee portal application. When I resize the browser, you can see that the application is fixed in size. I'm returning to Flash Builder and switching to design mode. In the states view, I'm selecting the portal state and then the monthly events panel, which is the last panel in the display. In the properties views, size and position segment, I'm checking the top left box and setting its value to 574 pixels. This will set the panel 574 pixels from the left edge of the browser. Now I'm setting the right edge to 24 pixels. I'm saving the file and running the application. When I enlarge the browser, the monthly events panel now expands to the right with the browser, but there's always 24 pixels around the margin between the panel and the browser. Notice that the text within the monthly events panel does not resize when I resize the browser. I'm returning to Flash Builder and selecting the label control and changing the width and height properties to 100%. I'm saving the file and running the application again. When I resize the browser, the monthly events panel and its content resize appropriately. Next, I want to apply vertical constraints so that the monthly events panel container will fill more of the vertical space and maintain that relative growth as the browser resizes. In the Properties view, I'm checking the box for the bottom constraint and setting its value to 15 pixels from the bottom edge of the browser. Now I'm checking the top constraint and setting its value to 95 pixels from the top edge of the browser. I'm saving the file and running the application. When I expand the browser, you can see that there is a 15 pixel margin between the bottom of the panel and the bottom of the browser, and a 95 pixel margin between the top of the panel and the top of the browser. Now I will set constraints for the other panels in the application. In design mode, I am selecting the Cafeteria Special panel and setting its top property to 95 and its bottom property to 15. For the Employee Directory panel container, I'm adding a top property with a value of 410 and a bottom property with a value of 15. I'm saving the file and running the application. When I resize the panel, notice that the panels expand and maintain the 15 pixel bottom border, but they also collapse until their content slips outside of the content area. Next, I will add the min height property to the Employee Directory container. Back in Flash Builder, I'm selecting the Employee Directory panel container and then switching to source mode to add the min height property with a value of 160 pixels. I'm saving the file and then running the application. Now when I resize the browser, the Employee Directory panel maintains a 15 pixel border below it until it reaches the min height value of 160 pixels. The Cafeteria Special and Monthly Events panel continue to collapse. Instead of adding the min height property to each of the panel containers, I will add the property to the application. I'm returning to Flash Builder and then removing the min height property from the Employee Directory panel. To the Opening Application tag, I'm adding the min height property and setting its value to 575. I'm saving the file and running the application. Now when I resize the browser, none of the panels collapse past the value set for the min height property of the application. For your next step, work through the exercise titled Creating a Scalable User Interface.